You are listening to the Queens of Quality podcast. This podcast will discuss some of the basic and not so basic impacts of compliance and quality within the pharmaceutical and biotech industries. We have a balance of laughter and education as we discuss the misconceptions about quality assurance within an organization. We are your hosts, Jen and Michelleanne. Let's get ready to start the show. Welcome to episode 2. And we are going to talk today about audits and inspection, audit readiness, inspection readiness, audits and oversight.
This is one of my favorite topics.
Yes.
This is where I show that I am an absolute quality and compliance geek. I'm okay with that.
So long as you're good with it, that's the important part.
Right.
And I agree. This is one of the most important parts, I think, in what we do within the industry. This is an opportunity for us to check ourselves.
Right. Yep.
It's also an opportunity for us to ensure that that quality framework that we talked about in the last episode is actually in place and allows for us to continually improve our processes, continually improve the work that we do. And provides a greater understanding of the work that we do.
Right.
Because it's not just one team who is impacted. It's across the board. This is a reflection of the work that is done by the entire organization.
I had a client ask me how many audits and inspections I've ever done. That was kind of my response. I was like, you want a number? And it was a legitimate question, again, based on the conversation we were having. And it was kind of like, I started to really think about it. And I was like, okay, well, how do I break this out? There's the ones I've led. There's the ones I participated in. There are the ones that I supported. There's so many different, to your point, it is not done in a vacuum.
Right.
And when I talk about like GMP inspections, people are like, oh, well, you were in the PV department. Why were you in a GMP inspection? I was like, if you have to ask me. And I have seen, I call it the pivot, that when the health authority gets there for a particular focus area, they have like a GMP or GCP inspection because of the circumstances, they pivot and they go down a different line of questioning in a area. And even though they may have started out in a GMP or GCP, whatever, their original initial was, they end up talking to another department much more extensively than who you would think is the quote unquote target department or the responsible department. And it goes back to your comment that we talked about last episode about the communication lines and how everything is connected.
Yes, it is. And having done mock inspections, the things that you learn about an organization from who they send to represent different groups for a mock inspection is very telling.
Absolutely.
For fair disclosure, Jen and I actually met when I was doing a mock inspection of a company that she worked for.
Still in house. Yep.
And, the first day I picked out people, not maliciously, but they couldn't answer the questions that should have fallen under their knowledge base.
Right. Their immediate remit.
Yes, they're absolutely their immediate remit. And so I said, these are not people who should go before the actual inspectors.
Right.
Like day one, let's eliminate these folks. Don't even bring them in the room. There's no point.
Yeah. And back in the day, I had a colleague who would say, they're the people you give movie money to. These days we binge watch, right?
I love that.
And, we have cell phones and we're all connected and that kind of thing. But back in the day, as I date myself horribly, they're like, go watch the Star Wars trilogy. It's playing at whatever. and here's $20, which included your popcorn. That's how long ago it was, right? We cannot get a hold of that person. They are on sabbatical or an island or something like that. Do not be in the building.
Right. Yes.
And then there was people that you just want to clone.
Exactly. Exactly.
You don't care what topic it is. You just want to clone them because they just have that, they're comfortable with it.
Yes. And absolutely.
I mentioned this is my favorite area because so often it's perceived as they're trying to find something wrong, and it's like, well, no, let's kind of flip that around. And I alluded to this in the last episode where this is your opportunity to tell them how fantastic you are. Do you have areas for improvement? Yes. Did you identify them yourself? That's the best part. And you're working on it. Because if they have to tell you what your problems are, that's a problem.
Right.
And that never goes well. Needless to say, it's an uncomfortable conversation, But that's where, again, there's this sense of, oh my gosh, they're going to find me out. It's like, well, no, to just tell them how fantastic you are. And you tell them the truth. Like, I'm good at what I do. Full stop.
Well, and so, yes, that is absolutely valid for inspection.
Yep.
And we also have internal audits.
Yep.
Where identify the pieces that you think need work. This is the time and the place for it. And this is also something that we have seen time and time again, both as in-house team members and as auditors, where you go in as an auditor and the team members will say, if you could please include this in the audit, because we have tried to kick this up the chain and we get no response. But if you put this in the audit report, then they'll listen to you.
Right. Yep. More than once. Yes, that's happened.
Make that part of the finding and add a finding about communication with the people who are actually doing the work.
Right.
If they say that there is an issue, listen to them.
Right. Yeah.
Hear them.
Right.
They are doing it. They can identify it.
And that goes immediately to the point about if the health authority finds it and either you don't know about it or you're not doing anything about it, that's less than desirable, shall we say.
Right. You don't want a 483 because the health authority told you.
Right.
And then it's something that your team members have been telling you for years.
Right.
Or even for months.
Exactly. And that's the challenge too, because, we talk a lot about the communication and the dynamics and the culture of the organization, because if people are not being heard,
right,
then that's not going to make for a very pleasant workspace.
And all of this is viewed very much as soft skills, soft points, but they're not. They're really critical.
Right.
It's very critical that all of these pieces be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because the more pieces you have, the harder it is.
Yes.
And that's where, again, and I fully appreciate, and I have had to make those hard decisions myself where, you only have so much time, money, and resources, right? Yep. So you have to make the hard decisions as to what you're really going to address. So you don't have the resources to address everyone's concern or idea. And I think that, the teams who are doing the work are the best resources for the great ideas.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. And you just may not be able to get to it. And that's the reality of it. That doesn't mean it can be ignored in its entirety, kind of thing. Some of the things that I've kind of worked through with clients is put it on a project plan, so you at least have acknowledged that, whether it's a finding from an audit or that kind of thing, that you've acknowledged that we've been able to put it on the to-do list. Right. Kind of thing. Yeah.
And to move it a step out from the internal audit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I think it's really important to have an audit program and an audit plan that you set at the beginning of the year. Like these
Mm-hmm.
are the internal audits that need to take place. This is the internal work that we're looking at. And then that takes us to the next step, which is vendor or
Right.
supplier
Yep.
audits and
Mm-hmm.
inspections. I cannot tell you how many times I have said the statement that I'm about to say. The sponsor
Mm.
is the ultimate responsible party
Mm-hmm.
for all activities related to the development of their products. The sponsor is the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate responsible party.
Right. Yep. I talk about abdication of responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even in just general conversation with clients, I hear a lot of, oh, well, the vendor does that. And it's like, yeah. And that's like I've actually heard someone say that during an inspection. My vendor does that. And that's where it's just kind of like that just never, again, it becomes a very uncomfortable conversation. And it's not the way you want to go about it.
Right.
And the vendor piece of it is there's so many different facets to it.
Right.
And you talked about the sponsor responsibility to it, where I have come to appreciate bringing in an external body to do those kinds of audits. It actually promotes the relationship between the functional area or the contract owner and the quality organization.
Yes.
Because your quality organization is now supporting the function in the preparation and the activities and everything like that. Because when you outsource it, it's at the risk of sounding redundant or, issuing my master of the obvious comment. It's someone outside of your organization. It's an objective third party who has no bias associated.
Right. And regulatory agencies, health authorities have come out and stated that independent auditing firms are the preferred choice because of the potential for conflicts of interest being eliminated.
Right. Yeah.
And we need to have objectivity and independence across the board for this. I've worked with clients who have said, well, why should we have an independent group audit this vendor when they have an internal audit team and they can audit themselves and let us know how they're doing. And I just think, does your fox watch your hen house too? Like what?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a nice idea because again, you're generally in those instances, you're working with relatively smaller organizations where they don't have a well-developed quality organization or a lot of resources available within their quality organization. So, you want to be able to outsource it. So yes, you can outsource it, but again, you end up if you use the same company, you're including that bias. You've now outsourced your bias.
Yes. I've had it go the other way where as an independent auditor, I've gone in to audit vendors and the vendor has said, I really view this as more of a partnership with the sponsor. And I've had to correct that and say, you're not a partner. They are responsible for your activities. You are the help. It didn't go over well, but it had been a really bad couple of days by the time I said that, and things were just going really poorly.
Yeah.
It wasn't my best day.
Right.
We all have, do you remember I was talking about being human?
Exactly.
It wasn't my best moment.
Right.
Wasn't my best moment. But
And
you know what? It's still true.
It is, and that's where, I really respect a lot when, people talk about the collaborative effort and they trusted their vendors. And that's great because you need to have that level of trust. You also need to have that level of oversight.
Absolutely.
And you can take their recommendations. And again, that's why you outsource and you contract with people outside of your organization because perhaps they have a level of expertise you don't. And that's okay. You don't need to know everything. You need to ensure that what they're doing is aligned with the regulatory requirements.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's where, again, having that objective third party organization come in and do audits, whether it's for your vendors or even internally, ends up being I have found it to be a much more productive and ultimately a much more collaborative activity. Because how many times have you heard, you probably don't even know, I know I can't count this high, how many times have I heard, that, oh, quality is the police. And that's not the point. I had a situation once where I had outsourced an audit, which was great. I had an objective third party doing it. So I worked with the contract owner for the activity, and they got to know me pretty well. And they're like, should you be doing this? Which I thought was a fantastic question, because they were ensuring that I was going to stay objective. And I'm like, well, here's the beauty of it. I've outsourced that. So now I can actually help you prepare and help you be successful.
Yes.
And they were like,
Oh,
wow. I was like, exactly. Right. And then, what happened, 6 months later, or, whatever it was, they called me and they're like, hey, I have a question for you. And I was like, oh, like that is the best part of my day.
right.
When someone says, I have a quality question, or I have a, question about compliance for this, that, and the other. It's like a great day. And it all started with the audit. It was just a regular routine vendor audit.
See, my favorite is when I do inspection readiness training or inspection ready, mock inspections. And I have people come back to me and say, I used what you told me in the readiness and it really helped. And some of it is around like calming yourself, recognizing that the inspectors are human. And so it's okay. And those are my win moments, is when I have people come back to me and say, that really helped.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, like the philosophy or the approach from the industry in general is shifting a bit, because I do find that more internal quality organizations are partnering much more readily with the functions, and the functions are being much more collaborative, and they're understanding that quality is not the police. So then you have the opportunity to outsource the audits, and the auditor is kind of the practice session really for an inspection.
Right.
One of the things, so it used to be, okay, you use the audits as the inspection readiness activities. You have your mock inspection where you truly are in that intensity, and then you have the inspection itself. I've seen an interesting trend with some of my clients where they want to have really like interview practice sessions, and it's not an audit because it's not on the audit schedule. There's no findings and that kind of thing, but it's not the intensity of a mock inspection where you basically take everyone offline for a week.
Right.
And it's not so disruptive to the day-to-day business kind of thing, because everyone's busy, right?
Right.
So, what has been happening is that the approach that I've been taking in terms of working with clients is working through the interview skills piece with them.
Yes.
And exactly to your point, I've had people come back to me and say, I'm so glad we did that, because so-and-so came to visit 6 months later and they asked the same questions you did and we knew how to answer them.
Yep.
And it's very much that coaching kind of environment where I think it was a little lacking before, because a lot of the mock inspection piece, because it is treated like an actual inspection,
Yes.
you lose the opportunity to get coached.
Right.
So that's where, again, I have, and provide that immediate feedback to somebody in terms of, okay, you probably don't want to phrase it this way. Let's kind of approach it that way.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, I'm taking my hat off because you're saying X, Y, and Z. I'm like, so that means I'm going to ask you about this, that, and the other. And they go, oh,
right.
So let's try it again, kind of thing. And again, it gives them the opportunity to refine what they're really going to say.
Yep.
And how best to present the good work that they are doing.
Yes.
without throwing their colleagues under the bus or saying, oh no, Michelleanne does that. I don't know about that. You know?
That's not something that I do.
Right.
That's something that somebody else does.
Right. Oh, that's not my job. I love that answer. That's a good answer.
Don't do that.
Yeah. That's the second thing that you shouldn't say in an audit. My vendor does that is the first thing. The second thing is, oh, somebody else does that.
And the third thing is, if you don't know the answer to a question,
don't make it
say, I don't know. I will find that information for you. Do not
right.
Guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or lie.
Right. I think it happens this way. It's like, no, if you find yourself heading in that direction, then you should probably you should not answer the question.
Do not answer. Yeah. Yes. Say, I don't know.
I don't know. We will find out for you. Right.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's another piece, is the reason that we have policies, SOPs, and work instructions is not so that we can memorize everything, but so that we have something to reference, so that we can say, you know what, I don't know what this is exactly, and we can look it up.
Right. And it's okay not to know, because again, you're not expected to know everything.
Right.
And what I've seen too is that that's where the relationship and the dynamics between, because there's generally a quality person within the room, that's where the dynamics and the support that you get from your quality person should really come into play.
Absolutely.
Because if you say, I don't know, that's generally where they would jump in terms of, and we will get the answer for you, kind of thing. Like that's where that dynamic becomes really important.
Yes.
I call it the chemistry.
Yep.
And no matter how many audits you go through, how many mock inspections you go through, you can't teach the chemistry.
Right.
And that, I think, is that's the magic ingredient, is making sure that
Absolutely.
Chemistry is there, and it gets built through the audits and the mock inspections and that kind of thing. But the last place you want to find out that it's not, that your reaction is off course, is during the inspection.
Yes.
Right.
And so, okay, so we've covered the importance of an audit calendar.
Yep.
The importance of doing actual run-throughs of the communication.
Right.
Having the communication talks.
Right. And identifying the right people to be in front of an inspector.
Yes. Identifying the right people. And this is something that we brought up before we were recording this episode, but performing the due diligence and performing audits of your vendors, this is not to check a box. This is to actually ensure that they are qualified to do the job that you are hiring them to do. Because you cannot say, I've outsourced that.
Right.
You cannot say, oh, the vendor does that. You need to know that the vendor is doing what you are paying them to do.
Right.
Providing the services that you are contracting them to do. This is not a checkbox scenario.
Yeah. And I've seen it done in-house, outside, the whole 9 yards, where essentially you're given a checklist to go through, and you go through and you tick the boxes, and it's like, that doesn't add value for the client. And there's so many other risks associated with outsourcing to anyone, because again, you don't have that immediate view. Like you trust, you go through the oversight piece, not the, they're not part of your team, like it or not, no matter how much, you want to partner with them, they're not part of your team. So there are so many other risks that can come up. And one of the things that I started to do with, I've asked my clients, do you want extra blah, blah, basically the risks versus the non-compliances, because your non-compliances go into the audit report. but that doesn't mean you don't have any risks.
Right.
So again, kind of, I mean, when we talked about the first episode, you have to be compliant with something. So they may be able to demonstrate that they are compliant with X, Y, and Z, whether it's the regulatory requirements, their SOPs, or your contract, or all of the above. And that doesn't mean that there aren't any risks there. And that's one of the things that has really given some of my clients the insights that they need in terms of helping and demonstrating their oversight, shifting the relationship a little bit. Nothing drastic. They're not just going to go out and find another vendor. Like, that's not the intent of it. It's really to help the client make informed decisions so that they can better manage what they are outsourcing. And as you eloquently put it in the very beginning, the sponsor is ultimately accountable.
Yes. The ultimate responsible party is the sponsor.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
The whole statement.
Right. And that's where, again, if they know what the risks are, then they at least have the awareness to mitigate.
Yes.
Because the biggest risk in any organization and in life in general is that you don't know what you don't know.
Right. Okay. So
listen to those on the ground because they know.
Yes. Listen to your team members.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you go through internal and vendor and supplier and partner. Partners are also very important to audit your partners. And set that up in an audit calendar so that you can do them. Like, I'm not saying you have to audit every vendor every year, because that should be determined by your calendar as well and by the quality department.
Mm-hmm.
But there should be calendared activities every year.
Right.
And training on all of that, because you want a wide variety of team members internally to pick from who have been groomed to be able to go before an auditor or an inspector.
Yep.
This is not just time to check a box. This is real activities to ensure that you are compliant with regulations, with your objectives.
And to show them how good you are at what you do.
And to show them how good you are at what you do. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I'm everybody's cheerleader.
So thank you again for joining us for another episode of Queens of Quality. Please reach out. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to hear. And tell your friends.
Excellent. Thanks,
and we'll
Michelleanne.
talk to you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Queens of Quality podcast. To continue the conversation, please follow our LinkedIn profile, Metis Consulting Services, or for additional resources, visit our website at metisconsultingservices.com. You can listen to the show free anywhere you find podcasts. Love the show? Don't forget to subscribe, like, review, and share with others. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you next time.